Three, two, one, go.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I am Shawn Graham. I am the interim CEO with the National Black MBA Association, which is the premier business organization serving Black professionals. So last week, I had an opportunity to speak with a phenomenal gentleman regarding the clean economy. Um, I immediately thought that members and my friends and my network needed to hear what he had to say. Let's face it, Black Americans are underrepresented in the energy sector, as well as we transition in the clean energy sector. Diversity has always been an issue. Taj, thank you for joining us today. Please tell us your story and how did you get involved with this work?
Shawn, thank you so much for inviting me. And first, I'm going to say I'm a proud member of the National Black MBA Association ever since I got my MBA back at Pepperdine University. So I'm proud that things like this are happening and these discussions are continuing because the future is coming. I started out as an investor, and actually, to be frank, I was not a math or any type of economics major in undergrad. I studied poetry and literature. And the reason I say that is because, it shows that diversity in the types of education that you get will make you a more well-rounded individual and investor. But I started investing because I read this book long ago called Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun by a gentleman named Reginald F. Lewis. That book influenced me so because I read it first from a biographical standpoint, but then I began to understand this idea of wealth building from private equity and private capital. So that book changed my life. It changed the trajectory of what I was studying. It changed my membership into an organization called Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. And it really made me understand that we need more of us in this space in order to build wealth.
Wow. So while we were talking, one of the things that we talked about, because I had complimented you on your hat, and I know that you say you wear many hats. So if you can share with us today, I want to hear more about your hat. You share that with me. I would love for you to share it with the audience, as well as the bling around your neck.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Shawn, the space that I'm in venture capital is called clean tech, climate tech, or green tech. And we'll get into the definitions of that later. But as an investor in this space, one of the things I've always tried to do is ensure that we have different ways of visualizing the idea of climate change, and climate investing. Typically, most people look at it like electric vehicles. They look at it like solar panels, but climate and sustainability is so much more. It is the materials that we use that often emit carbon. It is the things we put on our body, the things we put inside of our body. So this whole piece of people going towards a plant-based diet, the phenomenal, experience of Slutty Vegan in Atlanta and the things that she's doing, that's purposeful. Because what's happening is that we're realizing that the climate initiative is important for us as Black folks as well. So to that point, what I try to do is show visually what it means to be climate. So this hat, if people can see in it, and it's more there, it's actually made out of waste. There's this theory called circular economy where you don't throw out the things that you don't need. You reuse them, you repurpose them, you repackage them. So this is a perfect example of that, of why we can use that to reduce, reuse, and recycle on our bodies. Secondly, you mentioned the stuff around my neck, right?
Yes.
Diamonds are great. They're not only a girl's best friend, but guys kind of like them too. But the reason for this is important is because these diamonds are actually lab grown, but they're made out of carbon. Carbon is captured in the air. It's converted into diamonds, and that's the jewelry that we're wearing. Because all this idea, there's two things that we're trying to do. We're trying to reduce our carbon footprint, which is what these necklaces and these diamonds do. And we also need to reduce our waste, what this hat does as well. So I think for me, this is the idea, and this is what clean energy culture is about bringing the culture to the climate space and having these opportunities and showcasing these products that are so cool and so awesome that we can wear them so great.
So that means you'll be making a hat for me. Is that correct?
The company will. And for those who want to know, it's out of Brooklyn. Hat company called NTTE. Phenomenal. Tell them I sent you.
I absolutely will. And, I was born and raised in New York City. So just to know that you're doing business out there is great to hear. So next thing I would like to talk about with you, as you know, Black communities are disproportionately affected by climate change in a variety of ways. So when we think about rising energy burden to health impacts from breathing in pollution, I personally suffer with reactive airway disease. I was born and raised in New York City. I never had a problem with my lungs or my airways, but when I moved south, I don't know what it is in the air, but I know that I've been personally impacted. So I don't know if it's the pollution in the air or if it's pollen, but I know that that's been a great impact in our community. When we also think about the utilities, so the displacement from inclement weather, Black communities are the least engaged in advocating for clean energy. So why do you think that is, and what can we do to change that?
Well, first, Shawn, thank you for their personal story. And then I too have one. I think often when we talk about climate is more than just about saving the animals and saving the world. It is really three things. It is a public health issue, is it an economic issue, and it's a social justice issue. And you touched on three of those things. Moving from the north to the south, the impact on the health as well. January of this year, I just had a kidney transplant after being on dialysis for almost more than 5+ years. And that treatment towards dialysis came from the environmental factors where I grew up in Dallas. Now, two of my cousins also had this disease as well and did not realize, did not coordinate that idea, their sickness towards the environmental factors where we grew up, where we all grew up in Dallas. Mm-hmm. And so to your point to why don't we have this conversation in our Black community? Because a lot of times we're unaware of the impacts of us and the things that are happening. I also look at people who live next to off-ramps in major cities. And a lot of the asthma that's there, a lot of the eczema that's there, that's coming from the pollution from the vehicles. When you look at the situation for me, what it was a lot of the communities that were not of color lived in the north side. A lot of communities that were of color lived in the south, and the runoff from the water and from the pesticides and everything like that. And so these things are reality that impact us. But also, too, the good thing about it is that as humans, as Black folks, we are resilient. And what that means is that there's an old phrase, and my folks in Atlanta may have heard this before, called "you find a way or make one." And I think what's exciting about this is that our Black community, we're finding our ways into climate. We're finding our ways into ways to really tackle this climate crisis and benefit us as well.
Wow. So the National Black MBA, we have well over 10,000 members, And so when I think about our members, and I'm sure that they'll be asking me questions, why should we care about clean economy, and what does that mean for the Black community? Yeah,
well, that second point that I made when I talked about a public health issue, an economic issue, and a social justice issue, let's concentrate on the second one.
Okay.
The clean economy, the green economy is going to be $1 billion+ industry, not just in the US, but globally. I'm from Texas, Shawn, and one of the things we've always said is that we don't want Black folks to have an economic Juneteenth. We don't want to get around to this space long after the money's dried up, long after everything is done. We want to get into it from the ground floor. Give you a perfect example. 100+ years ago, when the horse and buggy was around, the gas-powered vehicle came about, and a lot of people, a small subset of people, made a lot of money that lasts to this day. John D. Rockefeller's family, many others, Henry Ford's family, to this day that last. We're about to make another transition from gas-powered vehicles to electric vehicles, probably to hydrogen vehicles, and to other technologies that we may not even see or know right now. And it's an opportunity for us as folks to own this space. I always tell people from this standpoint, when you go in your car, and if you're driving a gas car, unfortunately, when you go into the gas station, who owns those gas stations? You have a gas station that's owned by a person who looks like you. If not, this is an opportunity to change that, because now the gas stations of the future are EV charging stations. The gas stations of the future are hydrogen charging stations. And so it's an opportunity for us to not only know about this stuff, but also get into it as well. And for MBA students, I think the key to that is going to be you have to match the passion, the knowledge, and the skill set. You already have a skill set as an MBA student to look at these things. The passion will come when you work with organizations like Clean Energy Culture as teaching you about this stuff as well. And then the skills piece of that is that we have to think about this as lifelong learning. This is not an industry that's going to be stagnant. It's going to increase. It's going to increase as the years go on. And so we have to be purposeful and ready to tackle these issues and to learn from it as well.
Well, with this being $1 billion industry, we know that it's obvious that diversification is going to have to take place. Clean energy absolutely must diversify. So as the new clean economy emerges, we know that ownership is going to be key. That's just the bottom line. So how
Yep.
can we, as Black Americans, the Black community, and we look at the disproportionate amount of funding that's coming into our communities, my question is going to be twofold. So what is venture capital community doing to address the inequity in climate tech funding? And as well as that, are there any examples of Black clean tech entrepreneurs that have created companies that are addressing the climate crisis?
Absolutely. Great questions. I think first, from a venture capital standpoint, I'm a fund of fund investors, which means I invest in other venture funds. And so doing that increases the amount of folks who are in this space to make the investments in the startup companies that are led by Black and brown folks. This past year, we provided capital to 10 climate funds in the US and Europe that were all led by people of color. So I think that's happening, and you're seeing a lot more people coming to the space who are launching funds and understand the importance of climate. In addition, you're seeing people what I call climate curious. This may be funds that historically have invested in other spaces, but now they're investing in climate because what they're realizing is that climate impacts fintech, climate impacts AI, climate impacts NFTs, all these things come into that place. And so that's one of the reasons that we're seeing a lot more of that. In regards to the founders in the space, this is the part that I love, because I think, I see a lot of the founders in the climate space, and I know a lot of them, especially a lot of the Black founders. And I think there's a few that I want to name and shout out because I think they're great. First is Donnell Baird of Black Power. Black Power just raised over $70+ million, and their tagline is turning businesses and turning buildings into Teslas, based in New York. Phenomenal company. Donnell is doing his thing, and I think that's a prime example of how you can really kind of put the work in to do a lot of it. Another company that I'm a personal investor in, along with my fund, is Charger Health, located in Los Angeles, started by a young lady named Camille Terry, who grew up in sunny South LA. And what's interesting about her is I actually met her at Nipsey Hussle's accelerator down in LA. And so shout out to Nipsey. This is when he was alive. But this idea that she had was that as we're going to and building more electric vehicles, each state are making people buy new cars as electric vehicles. Who's repairing the charging stations? Because if you have an electric vehicle, you may have had the hurt of going into a charging station that's not working. Well, she's creating a core of workers that are coming in and repairing these charging stations, making them stay online. And so she's an integral part to this whole idea. And then the third founder, I'm also an investor in that I love, and he's also my fraternity brother as well, based in Boston, a guy by the name of Josh Aviv with a company called Spark Charge. Again, the reason why that's important is because as we're having these electric vehicles, when you electroning them up or gassing them up, you do it at your home, you may do it at your place of business. But what he does is he allows you to get your car charged anywhere where you're at, as long as you have your phone and an app. So you're at the grocery store, you take a little bit longer time. You're at the mall, you can get your nails done. You can download this app and get your car charged while you wait. And I think that's going to be the future of it as well, right? Because I think those things of on-demand charging are going to be interesting as well. There are a slew of other founders that's in this space. There are a lot of founders that are coming up. And I think that it's a really interesting space to be in, and it's a space that people need to know about. Because I just gave you 3 examples that's in the energy and transportation space. But we have more in the water space, like the former Miss Spellman, Lacey Redux, who has a company called Olacom Minerals, and so many more. So I think it's exciting, and I can go on and on, Shawn, about the wonderful founders that are in the climate space that look like the folks in this and who are watching this, and you and I.
Wow, I'm really happy to hear that. I know when I was growing up, my mom would say, turn those lights off, the electric bill is going to be too high. And even now I find myself repeating that. I have my grandchildren, my twin grandchildren, and I tell them, turn that water off. Water costs money. So they're trained to just turn the water off, turn those lights off. But when you put it in perspective, in comparison to white households, Black households spend 43% more of their income on energy costs. Hispanics spend 20% more, and the Native Americans 45% more. So when it comes to corporate America, is there anything that Black MBA members should be aware of? Because I know that, we're hoping as we're having these conversations and we're hearing about the billions of dollars, but how will that translate into job opportunities or entrepreneurship opportunities? What should we be aware of when it comes to corporate America?
Absolutely. I want to piggyback and touch on what you just mentioned about, the family and everything else, turning the lights up in the water. Shawn, that's because we've already had sustainability in our minds, in our hearts, and in our souls from the very beginning. We're protectors of this earth. And the problem has been, or the issue has been, we just never called it what the folks are calling it now. Here's some other examples in addition to what you just said. Here in California, where I'm at right now, there's been laws that have reduced the amount of the plastic bags that you typically see in the grocery stores. And the label for the bags are called single use. In my home, when I was young, those bags weren't single use. Those bags were used for trash can liners. Those bags were used for hair caps when my sisters took a shower. Those bags were used to pick up the poo from the dog. It was used for so many things. So we've had this already ability in our minds to really kind of look at sustainability because we had to. And I think that's one of the key. You just mentioned about the energy cost, this whole idea of turning off the lights, that came from that. So we can reduce that cost that we're experiencing. I think to your question about MBAs going into corporate America and why should having a green lens, we call it important, it's really twofold. We're seeing the greening of corporations. More corporations that you may see are focused on sustainable practices. And I'll give you a few examples. Anybody went to Coachella this weekend, or last weekend rather, they may have seen that AEG and Golden Voice, they actually put on events around climate. And they were thinking about ways to be more sustainable, even in the festival grounds. When you look at things like, if anybody has ever bought a ticket on Google Flights, they receive 3 pieces of information. 1, how long the flight lasts. 2, the cost of the flight. And then 3, how many emissions are coming from that flight as well. So one last example as well, has anybody ever heard of the store Kohl's, which is a historically Midwestern store? They're here in Los Angeles. They're there in Texas and a few other places as well. Even Kohl's, the way they're marketing a lot of their product is showing the sustainable practices that are used in creating that product. So we're seeing this idea of companies in the past that would be green on the outside, meaning green in packaging, and they're becoming green on the inside. So, that is something that we're seeing a lot of. And I think as newly MBA students, when you come into these corporate positions, you have to do one thing. And I'm going to use this term, but I'm in family, so I love it. You're going to have to climate code switch. We know what code switching means, so I don't have to explain it. But climate code switching means that we have to use that language differently. So when I'm in Texas, I may talk about climate differently than when I'm in California. When I'm in California, I may talk about it differently when I'm in Mississippi. So similar to that, when you're in the corporate environment, you're going to talk about sustainability and climate a little bit differently based upon what the company's doing and how far that they've got on their climate journey, because everybody's going to go on it. And the reason for that, I think from the background of it, is that it's about capital and money. The market is moving towards it. The people who are younger than us are expecting it. And so, of course, corporations are going to follow the market. Down what the policy says, the whole idea is that if the market wants it, the market is driving it. Young folks have been talking about this for longer than we can see. Lastly, I would tell you, Shawn, if anybody in the audience has watched this show on HBO called The Last of Us, it's about climate change, right? Because if you remember in the very beginning, what they said is the reason why these fungi was like expanding and taking over because the world was warming too much. And so between a lot of young adult novels, between a lot of movies that's out there, the younger population are already having this in their mind and really responding to it. And thus, that's changing the corporation's response to it as well.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I will say no shame here. I still save my plastic bags from Publix and from Kroger and from the Walgreens. I have a drawer full still of the plastic bags. I just don't know if that's a habit just from my youth, but that's something that I most certainly still do. And also, so what else can our members do to, even from a health perspective, because we know that there's health equity problems that exist in our community, but we don't necessarily translate that into how the air or how the pollution and everything else is impacting us. So what message would you give to our young people of what can they do or how they can make some changes in their lives? Because, they are the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, number one, you can be fly like me and get some sustainable clothing. That'll be great. But number two, there's a reason here in Los Angeles, we have Kevin Hart, who just opened up a vegan chicken place. We have, of course, like I mentioned, the one I like, Slutty Vegan out of Atlanta, that has these vegan burgers. You have the rise of Beyond Meat, Impossible Meat, and all these other things. And then you have this idea of flexitarianism, where people are eating less meat they're eating probably on one day as opposed to anything else. The reason why that's important is because just even the agriculture piece of that, whether it's the methane gas or many other things, are contributing to a lot of the environmental factors that we're using and that we're seeing. I think for those of us who may not understand or are just kind of in our kindergarten phase to get into climate, I'm not going to parse everything out, because there's a different take on climate change and reducing the carbon, get into net zero versus reducing our waste versus being more sustainable. So I'm going to use a Big 10 strategy when I talk about this. But those are some of the things that we can do personally to reduce a lot of the factors, whether it's the carbon footprint, whether it's the sustainability, whether it's waste reduction. We can kind of look at the things we're doing. And also, the key to this as well is that, and I want to give an example of one of the schools where I grew up at in Texas, Paul Quinn. Shout out to Paul Quinn. And if anybody on looking at this, they either went to Paul Quinn, know about Paul Quinn, definitely put a PQ in the chat or for us. But what I love about Paul Quinn is that, they're in the state of Texas. And if anybody knows, Texas is God. Football is God to Texas. And what the good brother, Dr. Sorrell, who's also a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, what he did there was he turned the football field into a community garden. I want people to understand that him turning the football field into a community garden was controversial in a state like Texas. But what was needed is, I grew up in the area of Highland Hills. Access to fresh fruits and vegetables were few and far between. Further, what's happening now is that you're getting students who are coming to university, and now they're understanding crop rotation, they're understanding sustainable farming, they're understanding agriculture, which is going to be the heart of what we do. And so I think that things like that are resilient, and it goes back to this whole idea of finding a way to make one. He found a way to really kind of get his students into the agriculture piece, and he made a way with really kind of turning the football field into a community garden. And so that's just some of the examples. And again, the reason why that's important, more fruits and vegetables, more sustainably grown fruits and vegetables in our body would definitely help us as well.
So what would you say to our entrepreneurs? So we have a membership base that also consists of entrepreneurs. If they wanted to get involved with the clean economy, what recommendations would you have for them?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, of course, please follow Clean Energy Culture. I mean, they're doing a great things. I'm really proud of what the organization is doing. They're looking at ways to combine pop culture with climate. And for those, I'm a huge fan, this is the 50th year of hip hop. I'm a huge fan of the music. And one of the things I always point out is that there's a song a while ago, a guy by the name of DJ Khaled, and this artist named Little Baby speaking on it. And he says, in the middle of the summer, I have a hoodie on. That may have went over people's head. But when you think about how the weather's impacting, we were just in San Diego, which is a typically sunny space, and that's cold. So when he says things like that, you have to understand that climate is impacting everything that we're doing, and there are little bits and pieces that are coming out. And what I'm proud of Clean Energy Culture is that they're calling these things out. They're creating experiences just for us, so that way we can get and understand and get more knowledge about what's happening in the climate space. Secondly, I would suggest for those entrepreneurs who want to learn more and with a community, there's an organization that I'm a co-founder of and co-advisor of, I should say, Green Tech Noir, and that's greentechnoir.com. And we currently have about 450 members on our Slack. It's also LinkedIn. And what that is joining that would allow you to learn from a lot of the professionals that are there, because there are climate investors that are there. There are accelerator climate folks that are there. There are founders that are there, both in the US, in Europe, Africa, and the whole nine. So it's a really great community to join. And Shawn, I would really kind of put those two organizations as some of the first leaps into this climate space as well.
Okay, so for those who are not entrepreneurs, or members, who are specifically looking for jobs, are there any specific sectors that they should be looking into, specific industries? Because I know that there's a lot of, corporations that have, they come to our conference every year to seek jobs. There's plenty of jobs out there that's available. But are there any specific type of industries that you are recommend? We know we're talking about energy here, but are there any specific ones that you are aware of that they can tap into? Yeah,
while I'm very biased to energy, of course, and climate, I think one of the things we have to think about, for some of the members who may have seen ChatGPT or even Bard just coming out from Google, artificial intelligence has changed a lot of the way we do business and how we work. The key for me is that understanding and having this breadth of knowledge, so that way you can be a chameleon for these companies. And I think that one of the things that I'm always interested in is our access to data, our access to communication. You and I are in two different cities. We're having this conversation real time. That takes a lot of things to make this happen, whether it's broadband internet, whether it's the devices. And I'm literally talking to you on a foldable phone instead of my computer. And so I think those things for people who might get into this space, you know, selfishly, I'm going to always say have a tinge of sustainability in your mind, because that may be where the company's skating to, and you can be a huge proponent into that and gain some additional insight. But I would think a lot of the ways that we're changing the way we educate ourselves, we're changing the way that we get jobs from a skills-based standpoint. Those are some exciting things in the way that we access. One of the things I will say, Shawn, though, in addition to really kind of knowing the industry and the industries to go to, I think it's important to also know, once you get in there, how do you navigate? When I worked in banking, I worked for Wells Fargo and UBS. I was lucky enough to have not only a mentor who mentored me, but also a sponsor. And there's two different things. You know, a mentor might be your colleague. A mentor might be in the same level as you and can give you advice of doing your job and doing your job well. A sponsor, to me, within their organization, helps you find a pathway to go higher and gives you the groundwork so you can take their stairway to heaven and be a different type of employee at their company. So I would definitely say for the folks here, recent graduates, current students getting their MBA degree, always make sure you collaborate and you have both a mentor and a sponsor to help you make that transition from one of the levels to the next level as well in your corporate journey.
Yes, and for those out there who are listening, and I know that you hear that all the time, most people are most familiar with having a mentor, but please explain to our audience what the difference is in obtaining a mentor versus a sponsor.
Yeah, I think a sponsor, when I look at a mentor, that mentor is giving me advice. And if I'm gonna break it down, that mentor is giving you game. But game is different, but for most people might see. For me, this is what game means. It means guidance, right? That's the G into it, right? The other piece of that is and I think from a guidance standpoint, what that means is trying to give you the direction that you want to go. Motivation, the M is for motivation, E is for education. And hey, I'm blank out on that. Apologies about. Make sure you follow the MBA LinkedIn. I'll put it there. But that's for me what a mentor does. A sponsor, though, is the person that lays the pathway, and it's typically a person a number of levels ahead of you. Managing more, probably even managing your mentor. But a sponsor, and that's similar to me, where you're in school and you have somebody sponsor you going to somewhere, they're paying for something. A sponsor is not giving you capital, but they're giving you intellectual capital and a pathway to increase your visibility in that company. And that's how I see those two differently, from a mentor standpoint and a sponsor standpoint.
Well, thank you, Taj. And I thank you for sharing that information, and thank you for having this conversation with the National Black MBA today. I hope to see you at our upcoming conference. Our upcoming conference is being held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania this year from September 12th through September 16th. We will have individuals like Taj that will be there. I look forward to seeing you there. And if you register before June 30th, you will receive a heavy discount. So please register for our upcoming conference. Please become a member of the National Black MBA Association. Thank you, Taj. And is there anything else that you would like to add before we wrap?
Yeah, thank you so much, Shawn, number one, for inviting me here and giving me the opportunity to talk about something that's so dear to me with this industry of clean tech and climate tech. I think that, again, that this is a space to where we're going to see a lot of movement and growth regardless of who the political party is. And even though some people may say that the growth that we've seen within the IRA and other things have come with the political parties, the market is moving this. The market is really educating itself and wanting to make sure that things are sustainable because they want to be here for a little while longer. So I think for us, it just makes sense to have this as part of our arsenal that we're taking up as well. Lastly, I want to just say, again, for all those students and current students, that we are so proud of the work that everybody's embarking on. And any questions, I definitely think that this is a great opportunity, and is thankful for Clean Energy Culture and the National Black MBA Association for even having spotlights like this to hear from professionals and hear the real talk, right? Because a lot of these things that I'm giving you and others that will be on the spotlight is going to be the real. And I think you won't get that in books, you won't get that in many places, but when we're talking to family, and this is family with the National Black MBA Association, we're going to be authentic. And I think that's what it's about.
That's right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And before we wrap, I just have one more thing I would like to add. June 13th and 14th, the National Black MBA Association is also going to be on the Hill in Washington, D.C. So as we speak about advocacy and when we speak about clean energy and other legislation that will impact people of color, National Black MBA will be on the Hill this year in June. So thank you, Taj. Again, I appreciate your time. I appreciate some of the jewels you dropped for our members and our network, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Absolutely. Shawn, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
All right, thank you.